Hello everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I never planned on serving it at all. Sometimes the universe just hands you the perfect opportunity to watch someone realize they made a terrible mistake. My name is Tony, and this is what happened when my ex-girlfriend decided I wasn't good enough for her new life after her graduation. Sylvia and I had been friends since we were kids growing up in the same neighborhood. Our families lived 3 houses apart on the same street, and we'd known each other since elementary school. She was the smart girl who always had her homework done perfectly, and I was the kid who was better with his hands than with books. We'd walk to school together on some mornings and hang out during summer breaks. Even as kids, Sylvia talked about becoming a doctor someday. I was more interested in how things were built and how they worked, spending my free time helping my Uncle Danny with carpentry projects and learning basic construction skills. We started dating when we were 15, right after finishing our sophomore year of high school. It felt completely natural because we'd been best friends for so long, and everyone in our families always said we'd end up together anyway. Sylvia was ambitious and driven, while I was more practical and focused on learning skills that could get me a good job right after graduation. The transition from friendship to dating was easy and comfortable. We'd been spending most of our time together anyway, and now we just held hands and kissed goodnight. When it came time to think about college during our senior year, the differences in our family situations became obvious. Sylvia's parents had been saving for her education since she was born and had connections at medical schools. My family simply couldn't afford to send me to college, even with financial aid and student loans. My dad worked in a factory making car parts, my mom cleaned houses for extra income, and there were 3 kids in our family to support. Even with grants and scholarships, the cost of tuition, books, room and board, and living expenses was completely beyond what we could manage. I wasn't bitter about it. That was just our financial reality. Due to these financial challenges, I couldn't continue in college like Sylvia was planning to do. Instead, I made the practical choice to go straight into the workforce and start earning money immediately after graduating high school. I opted to take a low-entry construction job with a local company that was willing to train new workers. I started as a general laborer making $12 an hour, which wasn't much money, but I was disciplined with my finances and saved every penny I could manage. I lived at home with my parents, drove an old pickup truck, and didn't spend money on anything I didn't absolutely need. While my friends were going off to college and partying, I was getting up at 5 a.m. to be on construction sites by 6 a.m. I learned how to operate equipment, read blueprints, and handle the physical demands of building work. The pay was low initially, but I could see a path to earning more money as I gained experience and skills. Meanwhile, Sylvia was incredibly ambitious about her medical school plans, and her parents supported her dreams completely. Her parents understood the medical field and could provide guidance about her education path. But even with her parents' better incomes, they couldn't afford to fully support Sylvia through medical school without taking on significant debt themselves. Medical school is extremely expensive. Tuition alone can be $60,000 per year, and that doesn't include living expenses, books, medical equipment, and other costs that pile up over 4 years. Sylvia managed to get admission to a decent medical school after taking the MCAT and going through the application process. But when the financial aid package came through, it wasn't enough to cover all her expenses. She was looking at having to turn down her acceptance because the gap between what she could afford and what medical school actually cost was too large to bridge. When I realized Sylvia was going to lose her admission to medical school because of money, I made a decision that seemed obvious at the time, but would completely change both our lives. I was still head over heels in love with her and couldn't bear the thought of watching her dreams die because of something as fixable as money. I had been saving every dollar I could since starting work, with the goal of eventually starting my own construction business. I'd been putting aside money for tools, a work truck, business licenses, and all the startup costs that come with going independent. It wasn't a huge amount by medical school standards, but it represented everything I had worked for since graduating high school. I decided to sacrifice my business dreams and put aside my own goals to use all my savings to cover Sylvia's bills and help her get through medical school. I believed it was an investment in our future together as a couple. Once she became a doctor and started earning a physician's salary, we'd both benefit from her success, and maybe then I'd have the resources to start my own business. What started as helping with her living expenses and textbooks quickly turned into something much bigger and more expensive. Medical school tuition was incredibly high, and the cost of living in the city where her school was located was much more than what Sylvia could handle alone, even with my help. While Sylvia was in medical school, the financial demands became overwhelming. I wasn't just paying her rent and buying groceries. I also ended up co-signing some of her private student loans because her credit score wasn't good enough to qualify on her own, and her parents had already borrowed as much as they could. Co-signing those loans was a massive financial commitment for someone making construction wages. I was legally responsible for tens of thousands of dollars in debt if Sylvia couldn't pay them back after graduation. But I believed completely in our love and our future together. This level of financial support was a lot for me to handle on a construction worker's salary, but I believed in love above everything else. Sylvia had told me countless times that we would be together forever, that she'd never forget what I was doing for her education, and that we were building something that would last our entire lives together. For 4 years, I worked overtime every week I could get it, took side jobs on weekends, and lived as cheaply as possible, so every extra dollar could go towards supporting Sylvia's medical education. I drove the same old truck, wore the same work clothes until they fell apart, and never bought anything for myself that wasn't absolutely necessary. After many years of working hard to assist Sylvia financially and emotionally, she finally graduated from medical school. I was incredibly proud of her achievement and felt like all our sacrifices had been worth it. She was officially a graduate, and we could finally start building the life together that we'd been working toward for so long. Sylvia's graduation party was held at her parents' house the weekend after the ceremony. Her extended family came in from out of town, her medical school friends were there, and everyone was celebrating her incredible achievement. I felt proud to be there as her boyfriend, knowing that I'd played a major role in making her success possible. But at the graduation party, Sylvia humiliated me by dumping me in front of everyone in the most cruel way imaginable. I had gone to the restroom to relieve myself, and as I was walking back toward the main party area, I could hear Sylvia talking to her family about her future plans. She was telling her parents and her sister that she was planning to leave me now that she was almost a doctor. She thought I was out as she spoke, but I came back quickly after using the restroom and could hear her say clearly, "I'm a doctor now. I need a husband who matches my new life. No offense, but a construction worker isn't it?" Sylvia was explaining to her family that she'd outgrown our relationship and needed to find someone more appropriate for her new professional status. She talked about wanting to date other doctors or professionals who could understand her career and move in the same social circles she'd be joining. It was after making this statement that Sylvia turned around and saw me standing there, and she immediately realized I had heard everything she just said about dumping me. The conversation stopped completely, and everyone looked uncomfortable knowing that I'd overheard her plans to leave me. Maybe Sylvia expected me to cause a scene or get angry and start arguing with her in front of her family. But I had learned from years of construction work how to stay calm under pressure and not let emotions control my actions. I kept completely composed, forced a smile onto my face, raised my glass, and said clearly, "To Sylvia, may success bring you everything you deserve." Then I finished my drink, congratulated her parents on their daughter's achievement, and left the party without saying another word to anyone. I drove home in complete silence, processing what had just happened and what it meant for my future. In the days that followed the graduation party, Sylvia didn't call or text me at all. It was like our relationship had ended completely at that moment when she announced to her family that she was leaving me. She made no effort to apologize, explain herself, or even acknowledge what had happened between us. I wasn't surprised by her silence, but it still hurt to have someone I'd loved and supported for so many years just disappear from my life without any real conversation about what we'd meant to each other. It felt like she'd used me to get through medical school and was now discarding me like I'd never mattered at all. About a week after the graduation party, I received a phone call that changed everything. The loan servicer and financial verification officers tied to Sylvia's medical licensing process reached out to me directly because they needed information and documentation related to the private loans I had co-signed. They explained that as part of the medical licensing process, they needed co-signer confirmation for several things: proof of my income and financial stability, contact verification to make sure I was still reachable, and formal acknowledgement that I was still legally responsible for the loans Sylvia had taken out. This was all standard procedure for new doctors who had co-signers on their educational loans. The medical board and licensing agencies wanted to make sure that all financial obligations were properly documented and that there were no irregularities that could affect a new doctor's ability to practice. I didn't immediately respond to their requests for information and documentation. After what Sylvia had said at her graduation party, I wasn't feeling obligated to jump into action just because she needed my cooperation to move forward with her career. I took some time to think about the situation and what my options were. Legally, I was still responsible for the loans regardless of our relationship status. But that didn't mean I had to make things easy for someone who had just publicly humiliated me and thrown away years of love and support. It quickly became apparent that Sylvia had suddenly realized her mistake in the way she'd handled our breakup. She couldn't get rid of me as cleanly as she'd thought because my cooperation was required for her licensing process. Without my prompt response to the verification requests, her loan refinancing was stalling, which meant her financial clearance for her medical license was being held up. This was going to create a serious problem for Sylvia's career launch. She might have successfully graduated from medical school and earned her degree, but she couldn't actually practice medicine or start her residency program without completing the licensing process and financial clearance requirements. At first, Sylvia sent me a casual text message. "Hey, I think you got a call from a board about my paperwork. Can you please call them back when you get a chance?" She was trying to sound normal and friendly, like nothing had happened between us at the graduation party. When I didn't respond to that first text, she sent another one the next day. "This is actually pretty urgent. I need you to confirm the loan information with the verification office. It's holding up my licensing process." Her tone was becoming more direct and anxious. Then the phone calls started one after another, as the deadlines for her paperwork were approaching. Sylvia's tone shifted dramatically from polite and casual to desperate and panicked because her entire career launch depended on my signature and cooperation with the verification process. I could tell from her increasingly frantic voicemails that she was starting to understand the position she'd put herself in. She'd assumed she could just walk away from our relationship without any consequences, but now she realized she still needed me for something important. I didn't scream or insult her. I simply decided to wait and see how desperate she would become. I had all the power in this situation, and I wanted her to fully understand that. Every hour that I didn't respond to her calls and texts was another hour of panic for Sylvia. She was probably imagining her medical license being delayed, her residency position being given to someone else, and her having to spend months restarting the process months after. When I finally did pick up the phone after letting her call for several days, my words were calm and measured. "You said you didn't need me anymore because I'm just a construction worker. Now you're calling me nonstop, begging for help. What exactly changed in the last week?" Sylvia immediately started rambling about how she needed me to please confirm the loan information with the servicer so her licensing could move forward. She tried to act like the conversation at her graduation party had been some kind of misunderstanding or joke that I'd taken too seriously. She explained that the medical board was requiring all co-signers to verify their information, and without my cooperation, her licensing was on hold. Sylvia begged me to call the verification office back and provide whatever documentation they needed to clear her financial background check. I listened to everything she had to say, and then I told her calmly that I would be happy to confirm the loan information with the servicer, but only when we reached an agreement about her repaying me for all the money I had spent supporting her through medical school over the past years. I explained that since she no longer wanted me in her life and felt that I wasn't good enough for her new status as a doctor, it seemed fair that she should pay me back for the financial investment I had made in her education when I thought we had a future together. Sylvia was desperate enough to agree to almost anything at that point. She knew that if she refused my terms, she would have to find a new co-signer and reapply for loan verification, which would cost her months of delays and waste all the money she'd already paid for the current application process. So she agreed to my demand for repayment, probably thinking it was a small price to pay to get her medical license and start earning a doctor's salary. Sylvia said she would pay me back everything I had contributed to her education once she got her licensing sorted out and started working. I told Sylvia that I would need our agreement in writing with proper legal documentation before I would contact the loan servicer. I got a lawyer, and we worked together to do some estimates of exactly how much money I had contributed to Sylvia's education over 4 years. The total amount was substantial. When we added everything up with a reasonable interest rate, Sylvia owed me a lot for her medical education. Sylvia agreed to pay this amount according to a specific schedule that my lawyer and I worked out. She was desperate to get her licensing process moving and probably assumed that once she started earning a doctor's salary, the debt would be manageable over time. One thing Sylvia didn't understand about our written agreement was that it didn't actually require me to follow through with confirming the loan information to the servicer. She needed my cooperation, but the repayment agreement was separate from any obligation I had to help her with her licensing process. The contract simply stated that Sylvia owed me money for her educational expenses and would repay it according to the agreed schedule. There was nothing in the document that said I had to contact the loan servicer or cooperate with her verification process in exchange for the repayment agreement. After getting Sylvia to sign the legal agreement acknowledging that she owed me money and would pay me back on a specific timeline, I ghosted her again. I stopped answering her calls and texts, and I let the deadlines for her loan verification pass without providing the cooperation she needed. It was past the deadline for her paperwork when Sylvia realized she'd been outmaneuvered. She started sending me insulting messages, calling me the devil, and using other derogatory words to express her anger about the situation I'd put her in. But I didn't care about her insults. I had what I wanted in writing. Sylvia probably managed to sort out verification months later. I didn't know or care how she resolved her licensing problems because I had moved on to the next phase of my plan. When the agreed-upon time came for Sylvia to start making payments on our debt agreement, I had my lawyer drag her to court for enforcement. She had signed a legal contract promising to pay me back, and I was going to make sure she honored that commitment. At first, Sylvia refused to pay anything, arguing in court that I hadn't completed my part of the bargain by helping with her loan verification. But the agreement had been airtight, prepared by my lawyer, and there was nothing in the contract that required me to help her with the licensing process. The payment schedule was divided into monthly installments over time, and Sylvia had to comply with the court's order to pay. If she defaulted on the agreement, the court could step in with serious consequences, either locking her up for contempt or giving me legal access to her assets and future earnings. She really had no other option than to comply with the payment plan or face losing everything she'd worked for. The court had the power to garnish her wages, freeze her bank accounts, or put liens on any property she owned if she tried to avoid paying what she owed me. Looking back on this whole situation, I learned some valuable lessons about relationships, money, and self-respect. The biggest lesson was that you should never sacrifice your own dreams and financial security for someone who sees you as temporary or disposable. I also learned that actions have consequences, and people who think they can use others without any accountability are often wrong. Sylvia thought she could take my money, my support, and my love for years, then discard me when she no longer needed me. She found out that relationships aren't just things you can walk away from without any ongoing obligations. Most importantly, I learned to focus on myself and my own goals first. I'm back to working toward starting my own construction business, but this time I have a substantial amount of money coming in from Sylvia's monthly payments. The money she's paying me back is helping fund the dreams I had to put aside to support her education. I'm not bitter about what happened because, ultimately, it taught me who Sylvia really was and saved me from wasting more years with someone who didn't value what I brought to the relationship. Some people will always think they're better than others based on job titles or income levels. But character matters more than credentials. The construction work that she thought made me unworthy of her new life as a doctor has actually given me skills, discipline, and opportunities that many college graduates don't have. I'm building something real and valuable with my hands and my mind, and I don't need anyone's approval or validation to feel good about my choices. Sometimes, the best revenge is just living well and letting people face the consequences of their own decisions. Sylvia wanted to use me and then throw me away, but she discovered that actions have lasting consequences that can't be avoided just because you have a medical degree. The phone calls from the medical board that started this whole chain of events taught both of us that you can't just erase people from your life when they become inconvenient. Some connections and obligations continue long after the relationship ends, especially when money and legal agreements are involved. I'm grateful for everything that happened, because it showed me what I'm capable of when I stop putting other people's dreams ahead of my own. Sylvia may be a doctor now, but I'm the one who's truly free to build the life I want without worrying about someone using me and then discarding me when something better comes along.